Welcome to How You Pictured It, the podcast for creative entrepreneurs ready to grow their business in a way that feels good. Here you'll find actionable tips and tools to create the business and life you pictured. I'm your host, Kate Hyde with Dear Kate Brand Strategy. Let's get started. We are in for a treat today. I interviewed Stephanie Taale with Flourish Online Management. She is such a great resource. We talked a lot about time blocking, figuring out how to make sure you're working in the most efficient way possible and profitable way possible, using systems and finding ways to set goals that are just right for you and fit your priorities and help you build the life that you imagined when you started your business. Let's jump right in. Hi, Stephanie. I'm so excited to talk to you today. Can you just give us a quick introduction to who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Stephanie. I am a mentor for creatives and have been doing this for about 4 years now. Starting as a designer and completely changed my business around to offering mentoring service for creatives. That's not what I really focus on. And I am originally Dutch, but based in Scotland. So I can see the rolling hills from my window and have the forest next door. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
So very cool. I love it. So tell me about, how did you picture your life when you started your business?
Yeah, so that's a great question because so much has changed from the moment that I started and kind of my expectations around it. So, and I think we often, when we start a business, we have this specific view of it and we almost feel like that's the one thing we have to do. We cannot really change from it, putting so much pressure on ourselves. And I actually turned my business around in quite a few different steps. And, I came from a corporate background, where with some twists and turns, I turned out to be a business analyst and pricing manager.
Okay.
But I originally wanted to go into art school. So I actually was accepted into art school, didn't go anymore, because I learned that I would mostly need to be behind my computer and I just wanted to be creative. I just wanted to draw and create. So I thought, oh no, I'm not going to do this. But after this many years in the corporate world, I thought, I really want to go back to doing something creative. So started my business as a brand and website designer. But I quite quickly noticed that a lot of business owners were trying to solve bigger problems within their business with a new brand or a new website. And I started helping my clients a little bit with that. And I noticed that a lot of the struggles were coming from not having clear goals or not knowing what the financial status was of the business. Was I making enough revenue? Was I making even profit? Or not having strategic action plans to go from where they were now to where they really wanted to go. And also with that, then not knowing what to focus on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Which is then snowballing into all of these things. And kind of on a whim, I started offering mentoring services that I was speaking to someone. She was talking about a lot of these things and I thought, I can help her, but with more than just a website.
Yes.
So kind of on the call, decided that I was going to offer mentoring services. Because it felt so right. And I felt I could do so much more than just brand and website design.
Right.
And that's kind of where it started. And then made the switch over the years to only offering mentor service.
Okay. So you started a business to get out of the corporate and to get more into your creativity.
Yeah.
And were you a person who really wanted that freedom in a small business, or what kind of did you imagine being a business owner would look like for you?
Yeah, I was really expecting to get more freedom from running my own business. But it ended up being the total opposite, that I was completely tied to my desk.
Okay.
Basically 6-7 days a week, a lot of weekends, a lot of evenings. So it was completely consuming me instead of giving me that freedom that I was looking for. And it wasn't until someone challenged me and said, but what will change in the future that will all of a sudden allow you to have more freedom to travel? Because that was one of the things that I really wanted to do, travel more.
Yeah.
And that really changed everything, because I thought, well, what will change? If I'm fully booked, am I then all over going to say I'm going away for a couple of months? Probably not. So something
Right.
needs to change now that will already get me closer to that. And instead of waiting until I kind of felt ready to take more time off, or until I had made a certain amount of money, or some other reason that would almost tell me that I was, or maybe just allowing myself to take that time off, I decided, okay, what can I do now to already get me closer kind of to that ideal picture that I had, to have more freedom, to be able to travel more. That's almost when COVID hit.
Okay.
So the execution of my plans went a little bit differently. Of course, wasn't able to travel. But the thing that I was able to do was start my travel blog. That was something that I had wanted to do for such a long time. Because I've lived in South Africa for a while. I met my husband there. We go back to it as often as we can. We go on safari. If you see my office, I have I have my giraffes behind me. So
I love
some
it.
travel always around me. So I started my travel blog, not realizing how much time that would actually take. So not realizing that it almost was a second job next to running Flourish Online Management. But it really forced me to rethink. It's kind of funny because at that time when I started, I was in such a struggle of how much time it was taking me. But now looking back, it really has kind of, all of these steps has kind of led me to where I am right now, because it really forced me to think about, how am I running my business? Where am I spending my time? How can I streamline everything? How much money do I need to make for my business? And how can I turn something that I'm doing now in sometimes 5-6 days into 4 days? Because I need to have time to run the travel blog. And this is now kind of all turned into the framework that I'm using for my mentor program, which is really all about simplifying, structuring, and streamlining. So it's kind of funny how you cannot always see it when you're in the struggle, but it all kind of leads to something in the future. And I can now kind of see that bigger picture.
Yes, I love that. So let's talk about then, tell me about what you do now. So what things did you have to change to get back to that kind of picture of how you imagined life when you started your business?
Yeah. So, I mean, it has been a lot of work around streamlining, structuring, really looking at, how am I spending my time? Am I spending it on the right things that are actually moving the needle forward? Or am I just kind of keeping myself busy with the things that I feel comfortable with, which for me is systems, optimizing websites and conversion rates and those kinds of things. While not spending that much time on the things that would actually move the needle, because if I am busy on the back end, no one knows that I actually exist.
Right.
So it's a lot of mindset work in a way as well, and kind of flipping how we look at what we need to spend our time on in our business. And I know this is quite different for a lot of the creatives that I work with, that what comes very natural to me is the systems and the workflows and those kinds of things. That's the thing where they need most of the help. Yeah. Because it's the client work that is the thing that is really comfortable, but it's all the back end stuff that isn't comfortable and often gets pushed to the side.
I love that. So let's talk about how did you realize people were in need of these systems, and how do you kind of help people figure out what their right size goals are?
Yeah. So, I mean, it kind of started while offering my brand and website design, when I was getting such deep dives into people's businesses and kind of seeing what was going on, and seeing where those gaps were that were probably not going to be solved with a new brand or a new website. So that's kind of where it started. And relating this back to my corporate experience, because this was what we were doing. We were setting huge financial goals and then setting budgets. What did we need to make per month? And then creating strategic plans to actually achieve those revenue targets. So it was kind of seeing how everything that I'd been doing for years was not happening in the small creative businesses.
Okay.
So kind of the thing that I started seeing is that even though we know we need to set goals, we're often told that we need to set goals, especially when the new year comes around. We need to set goals, but I think it's often something that is seen as a bigger picture thing that you need to do, but it's not kind of broken down to what does this practically look like and how does this help me to determine what I need to do on a daily basis.
Right.
So I've often seen it that goals are written down on a piece of paper, kind of end up in a drawer, never really to be looked at again during the year.
Guilty.
In the beginning, I did this too. Even though I'm like, oh, I should have known better, but I definitely did all of these things too. But the longer I was in business, I really realized how everything in your business is connected. From your financial goals and how this will impact how many services you need to sell, your pricing, which will impact how you are positioning yourself. It's impacting your messaging. Every little thing kind of feeds into the next thing that you need to do in your business. But I often think that goal setting doesn't really relate, or kind of, you don't often see those connections to what do you need to do on a daily basis. Because what if you can set your goals in such a way that it will actually help you to determine indeed what do you need to do today or what do you need to do this week in your business to help you get closer to those goals. And I think that really changes everything, because all of a sudden, everything that you do outside of clients' work is tied to you achieving those goals. Nothing that you do is random or just looking at a to-do list, which doesn't really consider what is a priority or what you actually can get done in a day or in a week. And I feel it really changes everything when you kind of have these predefined tasks that you know what you need to work on in the coming periods. But it all starts from setting those goals. And I see often that, especially when looking at financial goals, these are often very arbitrary, as in we're aiming for similar revenue targets that someone we know targets, or we're aiming for 6 figures because that somehow has turned
buzzword, right?
Real indeed. In business, or it's just this random number that you have in your head because you feel that this is what you should earn by now, because that's also, we always feel we should be much further along than where we actually are. Or that you're aiming to replace the salary that you've had in a previous job. These are all financial targets that are being set, but there's often such a gap between the want and the need. And what I mean by this is there's a need and revenue. So what is the revenue needed to cover the cost of your business for a full year? The contribution to your household, regardless if this is, if you are solely responsible for it or if you have a set contribution to your financial or family expenses. And ideally having a bit of a savings pot in your business to be able to invest. So that's the thing that you actually need. That is the things that you need to cover. But the want is often that revenue target. That is that arbitrary number that we somehow got from somewhere, because it can come from so many different things. And I know I've been guilty of this as well. Coming from a corporate job, I held on to the belief for so long that as long as I was not able to replace that exact revenue, I wasn't reaching my goals, or even worse, that I was failing because I wasn't at the level that I was able to replace that. Because sometimes you see these stories. I started my business and with 1 year I was replacing my corporate salary. You're like, well, that's really nice for you, but that's just not where I am. And it can give you such a feeling of that you're failing in what you're doing. But actually what I held on to this for such a long time. And then all of a sudden I realized that after quitting my corporate job, we moved from a 15-minute train ride from just outside of London to Scotland. With that change in location, my rent was cut in half. I didn't spend lunch money, or we didn't go into town on Fridays to have lunch outside of the office. So why was I still holding on to that revenue target that I had in my head that didn't make any sense anymore to the actual expenses that I had personally and then also in my business?
Right. And then that probably like helped open you up to living that life you imagined, right? When you had a more realistic expectation of what your revenue was.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I was really holding on in that sense more to an ego number than the actual financial targets that I had to achieve. And it's when you just want more and more and more, or you try to keep up with others and aim for goals that are not realistic for where you are, or not realistic because you're in such a different phase in business. It just sets you up to fail.
Yeah.
If you're really just not there, or it might not even be your goals, like the 6 figures. Are you just trying to burn yourself out to get to this number because you kind of feel you have to? I mean, that's not the reason why we start our business.
Right. Right. It's not. You're right. Absolutely. No. Absolutely. We don't want to be burnt out. We want to have this freedom and that ability to travel and all of those fun things. And if we're working so hard to hit this dollar figure that came out of someone else's expectations, that makes it really hard. So you've got a website for your small business, but you're not really sure if it's working. I've got a brand new free resource that gives you a grade for your website, like old school report card. It's a super easy to use checklist. You'll go through, answer questions, and at the end, you'll get a grade for each page of your site, plus your site overall. And you'll also get next steps to what you need to do to make your website convert and connect with your dream clients. So you have a site that sells your services for you, and you can get back to life just how you pictured it. Head to dearkatebrandstrategy.com/report card to get that free resource now.
Yeah, and that exactly, but also not just having the time to be present with family, but also the mental capacity, because it's one thing to physically be there, but if in your head you're constantly, if you're playing with your kids, but in your head you're like, oh my gosh, I still need to do this for the business, or I needed to edit this, or I should have sent this to this client. You're still not mentally present.
Right. Yeah. I know so many photographers will sit on the couch editing, like they're spending time with family while they edit. And it's like, it's not really the same. That's not the same thing.
You're physically present, but you're not mentally present. And that's something I hear from so many of my clients, that they're constantly feeling behind and indeed cannot just sit on the couch for an evening to watch some Netflix because they're feeling guilty with everything they should be doing, or the kids go to bed and they go back to work because there's so much that they need to do. They're always trying to catch up to where they feel they should be by now, or the revenue they should be making by now. And it can become so all-consuming. When that's kind of that hamster wheel that you're kind of in. And when I look at business goals, I don't start at business goals. I start with personal goals.
Okay.
Like or ask yourself, what amount do I need to earn with my business that is enough for you to live comfortably and will help you to stay motivated and not burned out?
Yes. I love that. Motivated, but not burned out.
Exactly, because it's and it's also one thing to hit a number once and to do it consistently and have a sustainable business. But it's that aiming for those goals that are not yours that will also just lead to so much burnout.
Yeah.
So starting from that, okay, what do I need to, because that's also one thing. What I see is that we often don't know how much revenue we're making. Are we making a profit in the business? Are we making a profit within the individual services that you're offering? Because it could be one thing to say, I offer 30-minute sessions or 30-minute headshot sessions or mini sessions, and then think that practically you're making a profit. But if you add up all the time to drive to the location, do the shots, then do the editing, then sending out the albums, and then in total you're seeing, oh my gosh, I'm only making $5 an hour if I actually divide the time that I actually spend to deliver this service. You might be making a profit in total in your business, that you have more money left because our expenses are often so low. But if your services itself are not making a profit, that's also very frustrating. And then just something is not working, which is a whole conversation of looking at profits and revenue and these kinds of things. But I really think when looking at your goals starts from the personal, and then how can your business support you in living that comfortable lifestyle?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's one thing to set financial goals. It's another thing to know if they're achievable.
Right.
Because I think often when you see a number on paper, when you're saying, oh, I want to make 40,000 a year, like, okay, but what does that actually mean when you break this down? And I'm not really talking here in the sense of, do you have everything in place to sell all of these services? But do you have the actual time to deliver these services? Especially when you have kids and you have school runs and outings and you want to have some family time and everything that comes with it.
Yeah.
You don't have Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. with undisrupted work.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have probably all these little time blocks here and there. You have your shoots often in the evenings and in the weekends. So it's one thing to have that financial number in mind. So one thing that I often do with my clients is look at the capacity that we're having. We're literally pulling out a piece of paper, put time blocks on there, and what are the times that are needed in the morning with the family, in the evening, in the weekends with the family. And then look at, okay, how much time do I actually have? And how realistic is that financial number that I have? If I break it down and saying, I need to sell, I did an exercise last week or the week before with a client, and we looked at that she needed to sell, I think, 40 sessions per month of 30-minute sessions to come to the financial goal. Like, how are we going to put that physically into the calendar?
Yeah.
So it's a tough exercise, especially as creatives. Looking at financial targets, it's often something that's kind of pushed at the side. But it gives such eye-opening results. Every client has to do this exercise. And some are like, oh, my financial targets are actually reachable. It's not that bad. And all of a sudden see that they feel quite comfortable with the numbers. On the other hand, I've also had clients that were like, oh, that number that I had in mind, it turns out it's really more aspirational because it's really not realistic to sell this many services. And I actually don't even have the time to deliver these services. So having a financial target that is realistic and really based on your personal situation is key. But then also look at, do you actually have the capacity to deliver that? And if you don't, you might need to change your packages. You might need to change your pricing. You might need to add different services in. So obviously there can come a lot of work from doing that exercise.
Right.
But it will give you a much more realistic view of what you're actually able to do and achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have a freebie around that, correct?
Around time tracking, indeed. That's kind of the starting point. Because planning according to capacity, you need to know how much time you're actually spending on your client projects, but also everything you do outside of your client projects. So that's really the starting point to be able to plan according to your capacity.
Okay, perfect. And I'll make sure to link that in the show notes for you. I want to switch gears just a little bit. Let's talk about how you can use systems kind of to help make that time and that capacity bigger.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, definitely time tracking. That's really key for working according to that capacity, but also looking at your pricing and your revenue and profits. kind of the system, and it's not really a system, but the first thing I always suggest is structure your week with time blocks, especially when you want to work according to that capacity. As this will support your capacity planning because you have dedicated time blocks and knowing what you need to work on when. But there's a little bit of a mindset which I suggest here is plan in things for your business, either in the beginning of the week or in the mornings.
Okay.
Because what happens if we focus on client work, we kind of let client work fill up all of our time. And then, yeah, we can get some things for the business done at the end of the week, but that hardly ever happens. I always used to do that as well. Just really let all of the client work fill up all of my time.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I did time blocks and planned in time for my business at the beginning of the days that I started seeing how much I could actually get done. So this kind of is a one thing. You don't need any fancy systems for it. Just use your Google Calendar with time blocks. That's all you kind of need to get started.
Okay.
But the next thing is having clearly defined client and business processes.
Yeah.
And this is where indeed the systems come in. I mean, I'm an absolute systems nerd, so I absolutely love this. I think it's one of the first things I did when I started my business, together with creating my website, is setting up Asana. Because I absolutely love systems. By now, I've switched to ClickUp personally.
I use ClickUp as well.
Yeah, absolutely the systems, because it supports you so much in streamlining your time, especially when you don't have a lot of time. So on one hand, I would say you have your systems like Dubsado and Honeybook. I mean, here in the UK, we cannot use Honeybook, so I have Dubsado. And these are really your client-facing steps of delivering your services, like sending the proposals, the contracts, the invoices, onboarding questionnaires, all of those things. And this will save you time, which impacts that capacity that you're having, but it also improves the level of service that you can give to your clients, which can result in returning clients or referrals. So I'm a big pro of using these systems. One of the questions I get often is, I only have a couple of clients. Should I use these systems? I would say yes. The earlier you can start with it and you can afford it, the better it is. Because if you're fully booked, it's so hard to find the time to put these processes and systems.
Right. Well, and if you have those, like if you have Dubsado set up, it's going to open up your capacity to take more clients, right?
Absolutely. And if you don't have it, or it's only set up in a little bits and pieces, you are leaving money on the table. With if you have a request coming in and you only respond 4 days later, but another photographer responded the same day or sent out a pricing guide, you are probably leaving money on the table. And that's just a waste. And then on the other hand, you have the ClickUps, Asana, Notion, as project management tools, which is really more of the business facing side. But this is where you can really maximize your time. Because you can track your time, you can plan your days, you can set sales targets, manage business plans. And I like to pull all of this information into project management systems, as a lot of my creative clients don't like spreadsheets. So I try to pull as many of these things into a project management system, just to plan for the capacity, break down your goals and action steps, and really make sure you focus your time on the right things.
Yeah. So are you using ClickUp mostly like as a to-do list, or how are you using that for clients, especially in like creative industries like photographers? How are you using ClickUp?
I am using it in a lot of different ways. It has indeed the client workflows in there. It has lead overviews in there, like who did I send proposals out to, who do I want to reach out to, who did I spoke to a while ago that said that wasn't ready. It has my content planning in there, my marketing planning, my time tracker is in there. I use my Google Calendar in combination with ClickUp, so I can literally drag in my task in my time block. So I always make sure I don't overcommit myself, because everything is planned into the time blocks. It has my brand guidelines in there. It literally has everything in there, social media planning, basically everything that isn't contracts, invoices, proposals. It
Yeah.
literally puts everything in there.
Yeah. And then that makes it so like when you're ready to hire someone or you want to get some help, you've got the systems already to kind of hand over in your standard
Exactly.
procedures for everything.
Exactly. And when I did last year, indeed, I was able to pull that person into a specific part of my ClickUp that has all of my business tasks related to my current goals for the next 6 weeks. And that also helped me to say anything that's not on this list is not what my VA is helping me with, because that's just not a priority.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. So how do you help to make these like really left brain? I can never remember which one's left brain and which one's right brain. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you make these really left brain tasks more accessible for right brain people like photographers?
Yeah. And I think the most important thing here is to really find a way that works for you. And because it's so important to remember that all of our brains work differently, especially when you have, and some of my clients have it as well, they have ADHD. Everything like, from organizing is just so much more difficult. So while one program or one way of working or one business process or client workflow works for someone, this really doesn't mean that it will actually work for you.
Yeah.
But what often happens is when we struggle with something, we just want to be told what to do because you've tried a lot of things. And this is where then courses or templates come in from other photographers sharing exactly this is how I worked, or this is how I built my business. And I think every one of my clients have gone through these kinds of programs where they're saying, I try to fit myself into these processes because it was working for someone else.
Yeah.
And it did not work for me. So instead of getting the confidence on the business side of knowing what they need to do, and I mean, this goes from anything from new systems like Dubsado or ClickUp, but it also is related to structure your week or onboarding processes. They started doubting themselves even more because they thought, oh, now I have someone else's process. That should work for me, right? And again, it's not working. And this is where I think we often don't have the tools to say this, even if you buy a template or do a course, okay, this is my starting point, but how do I now, instead of abandoning it because it's just not working, how can I make those small adjustments as I go along to actually make it work for me? And I think that's really the key, especially for those things for creatives, like all of the structures, having the tools and the skills to take a template and then adjust it until it works for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And just really understanding yourself and how your brain works. I know it has always been really important for me though to understand, like I have taken those courses. I've taken things and then I walk away from it and I'm like, well, I don't know if I want to do that because it's not really, doesn't really fit my priorities, and figuring out how to like make those shifts in what I learn to apply it to me and my own like way of thinking. I do have ADHD. And so like, honestly, systems like Dubsado help with that because it takes the like mental load of, I have to remember to send the contract. I have to remember to send the questionnaire. I have to remember to do this, and puts it into an automated process. And that's huge for me. So finding those systems. Those things are just so important.
It's often hard to get started with it if it's so out of your comfort zone. And especially when you try to figure out your business or client processes at the same time as figuring out the systems. And that's where it often kind of goes wrong and systems get abandoned or processes get abandoned. Because it's so many things at the same time. That just gets really hard. But it's creating the habits around using the new systems and the processes and then making adjustments as you go along until it is working for you.
So tell me, Stephanie, how do people work with you? What services do you offer, and how can we find you?
Yeah, so there are three main ways people can work with me. My main service is my mentor program, which is a 12-week program, and it's really based on the foundations of simplify, structure, and streamline. And it's mostly for those creative business owners that feel like the business is running them. They feel very confident in their creative abilities, but they struggle with not having the confidence to running the business side, and where the business has really taken over from them. And really the focus here is on implementation, where every week we talk about a certain topic, and then it's in between the sessions you implement. Because I think there's a time and place for more of a coaching setting where you're talking about things, working through mindset struggles. And there's also a time and place to learn skills and to start implementing and learning and really seeing that progress happen kind of straight away. That's what I love about this program. So to give a little bit of idea what are the things that we're talking about, it really is the full range of running a sustainable business, from pricing, business model, services, increasing profitability, to how are you spending your time? Are you spending it on the right things? And really optimizing and streamlining business and client processes. If it's just the systems or it's that you're looking for support with, I also have a done for you system setup service for DevSettle and ClickUp. If it's just the client and business processes where you're like, I'm fine with the systems, I can kind of work that in, or I don't have any DevSettle, ClickUp, Honeybook services yet, but I really need help with my processes, I have a VIP day that we really map out those processes for you.
Awesome. So if that sounds like something that you want to find, where should we find you?
Yeah, you can find me on flourishollinemanagement.com, Instagram as well, Flourish Online Management, Facebook, Instagram, all the same.
All the same. Wonderful. I'll make sure to link you. Yes, I'll definitely put those links in the show notes. Anything else you want to add that's important for photographers to know?
Oh, gosh. I think one thing that I've been seeing in the research that I've been doing, and it's a little bit of a different topic.
That's fine.
I recently did some market research into different photographers and the messaging on the website and what I can find on the website.
Yeah.
And what I was missing is, how can I work with you?
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of images.
Yep.
I'm seeing a lot of this is who I am, but I'm missing a little bit the client-facing information of, okay, but what can I expect from a session? How can I actually book? How can I get in contact? How does it work? If I have 3 little ones that are really unruly, how is that going to work? And what happens afterwards? What are I would say, think about the client journey and what are questions that they can have that would form a boundary from them getting in contact with you.
I love that. That's definitely like right up my alley, Stephanie. We're on the same page. Yes, I do find that a lot on photographers' websites. It's a lot of pretty pictures and the eye language. I like to take pictures,
I didn't say it that way,
yes,
but exactly what
it is a lot of eye language, and just even shifting that little bit of focus to, you want pretty pictures because, is so helpful. And then telling people like what the steps are and what it looks like it really converts clients to like raving fans for sure. So that is such great advice, such great advice. And I'm so glad you brought it up. All right, Stephanie, it was so lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much for coming on, and we will put all of your links in the show notes. And I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much for this talk today.
Seriously, there was so much great information there. I loved talking to Stephanie, and listening back to the episode, I feel like I learned even more about myself and my brain and how I can really make my business work for me more. Even though these are things that I have been working on over the full 11 years of running a photography business, it's always so good to have a refresher and just another point of view and perspective. I loved Stephanie's suggestion to time block, to pull out your weekly calendar and figure out how you're going to do all of the things on your to-do list, where they're going to fit, And if you're at capacity, knowing that information so that you know when to market, when to take things on, and maybe if you need to raise your prices too. The other thing that really stood out to me in our conversation was the idea of finding goals that are right for you and that make sense. I know often we get that 6-figure idea in our head, and maybe you don't need to make 6 figures. Maybe you need to make 7 figures. Maybe you just need enough money to pay for dance lessons or whatever for your kids. Those are all okay aspirations. It's totally fine if any of those things are your goal, but figuring out what you need and what you want for your goals is such a valuable piece of information, and I loved hearing Stephanie's perspective on that. I hope you've gotten a lot out of this conversation as well. I'd love to hear from you. You can DM me on Instagram or on TikTok at Dear Kate Brand Strategy. TikTok is where my heart is, but I'm trying real hard on Instagram, guys. You'll find me in the stories more often than in the feed, but I am there. If you loved this episode, I'd love for you to share it. Take a screenshot, post it to your stories, and tag me at Dear Kate Brand Strategy. Tell me what your biggest takeaway was. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.